Note: this is part 2 of the true story about Mrs. Winnie. If you haven't watched part 1, you might not fully understand the whole story. So please scroll down to the video description where you'll find the link to part 1. Thank you so much. Thank you for returning to hear the rest of my story. Revisiting these memories isn't easy, but your interest gives me strength to continue. Let me gather my thoughts. Ah, yes. We stopped at that night when my dear mother began revealing the damage my father caused before his death. Heavens above, my heart still tightens when I remember each word that left her mouth as she unraveled that rosary of horrors. I could barely breathe. What you're about to hear is so heavy that even today I wonder how we survived it all. But you know something? These stories need to be told. People need to know what happened after I fled from Cyrus Poulter's house. "Winnie," Mother said, her voice trembling. "After you ran away from Cyrus Poulter, your father, that cursed man," she choked on the words as if she couldn't force them out. "He gave Juniper to that monster." I felt my blood freeze in my veins. Juniper, my little sister, only 8 years old, so small, so innocent. Dear Lord, what had that wretched man done? "I tried to stop him," my mother continued, tears streaming down her weathered face. "But your father, he beat me so badly." She lifted her blouse, showing the scars. Jesus Almighty, they were horrible marks. Thick welts on her back, purple and yellow bruises on her stomach. I felt my stomach turn. But the worst was yet to come. With trembling hands, my mother turned to the side and pushed back her hair. There was a completely bald patch the size of a closed fist, and in the middle, a horrible scar crudely stitched with thick stitches. "He beat me with a piece of wood, child," she said, her voice barely audible. "I thought I would die right there. How could anyone do this? I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but I remained paralyzed, listening to that nightmare. I looked at my mother and for the first time saw beyond the suffering woman. I saw a survivor, a warrior who had gone through hell and returned. Poor dear mother. In that moment, I swore to myself that I would do everything to protect her and my siblings. Never again would anyone hurt my family like this. "Maddox went crazy with anger," my mother continued. "He called his friends, and they beat your father. Left him bedridden for days. My brother Maddox had finally turned against my father. The twins stayed with Mrs. Whittaker," she said. "Thank God she looked after them. I didn't want them to see all this." My heart ached so much, but Maddox didn't stop there. He and his friends went to Cyrus Poulter's house and brought Juniper back, my mother said, and I saw a glimmer of pride in her eyes. I felt momentary relief, but fear quickly followed. And Cyrus Poulter? He didn't do anything? Maddox threatened to burn down his house if he ever came near again, my mother said. "I've never seen Maddox like that. He seemed possessed, child." I sat in silence, trying to process it all. My brother, a 14-year-old boy at the time all this happened, having to become a man overnight, protecting the family by force. But Juniper... My mother hesitated, and I saw a deep pain in her eyes. She came back different, Winnie. Her eyes. It's as if something died inside her. In my innocence, I didn't fully understand what might have happened. "Your father became meek after that," my mother continued. "He walked around the house afraid of Maddox. Just one look from the boy would make him cower. I tried to imagine the scene. My father, that man who had always terrorized us, now afraid of his own son. It was almost ironic. but it didn't last long. "He soon returned to his old habits," she said, shaking her head. "The bar, gambling, drinking. Of course he would. He never changed, always returning to the same hole, because he only thought about himself." "Until one night," my mother said, and I saw anger in her eyes. "He made the biggest mistake of all. He bet our house in a card game." I felt my jaw drop. Our house, the only place we had in the world. "They came to put us out," she continued, "but I had the documents. The house is in your grandmother Judith's name. It's inheritance. They couldn't take it from us." I felt immense pride in my mother at that moment. She, who had always seemed so fragile, so submissive, standing up to those men. "The police came and everything," she said. "Your father disappeared after that. He was gone for almost a month. I waited for the end of the story, knowing it would be bad." My mother took a deep breath before continuing. "They found him dead in the brush with his mouth full of ants," she finally said, her voice a whisper. "Nobody knows who killed him. He had many enemies, child." I stood there, shocked. It was all too much for me. "And now?" I asked, barely able to speak. My mother looked at me, her eyes tired but determined. "Now we move forward, my child. There's no other way. I asked the Reverend to call you. I want you all living here with us." Then something simply unbelievable happened. My sister Juniper appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Just going to the bathroom, Mom," she mumbled. But when she saw me, her eyes widened in surprise and joy. But mine couldn't believe what they were seeing. Juniper, my little sister, only 8 years old when I left, with a pregnant belly. I felt my legs weaken and had to sit down. Such was my disbelief and horror. Juniper, oblivious to my shock, came to hug me with an innocent happiness that broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. My mother, with a choked voice, continued, "Juniper is expecting Cyrus Poulter's baby. She's already 6 months along. My child." My sister, as if she hadn't heard those terrible words, just wanted to know about me, how I was, if I had come back to stay, and how Thaddeus was doing. Her questions came in a cascade, full of a joy that contrasted brutally with the dark reality surrounding us. I felt like I was living a nightmare. How could this be real? How could we have let this happen to our Juniper? She was only a child. She would be a baby caring for another baby amid this madness of emotions. Maddox arrived. My older brother, always so strong. He hugged me and cried as I had never seen him cry before. I felt all his pain, all the weight he carried on his shoulders. "Where's Thad?" he asked between sobs. "I want so much to hug my brother." Those words caught me by surprise. Maddox and Thaddeus had never been close, as you well know. At that moment, it made me realize how much things had changed, how much we had all changed. I looked at Juniper, her round belly with her still childish face. How could she seem so happy, so innocent, carrying the fruit of such a horrible abuse? Did she really understand what was happening? Maddox, noticing my gaze, whispered, "She doesn't understand, Winnie. For her, it's like having a real doll growing in her belly." We tried to explain. His voice failed, and I saw fresh tears in his eyes. How many nights must he have stayed awake, blaming himself for not protecting our little sister? How many times must he have relived that terrible day, wishing he had done something different? The twins, Silas and Sawyer, appeared at the door, rubbing their sleepy eyes. When they saw me, their little faces lit up with toothless smiles. "Winnie!" they shouted, running to hug me. I hugged them so tight, feeling their skinny little bodies against mine. They had grown, but they were still so small, so vulnerable. I rested a bit, though I don't know how I managed to sleep. The next day, I woke to the smell of my mother's coffee. With a tired sigh, she began preparing coffee. We all sat together, steaming coffee in chipped cups, yesterday's hard bread on the table. It wasn't much, but it was what we had. The sun had barely risen when we left the house, heading to the church, all together, a silent procession through the dusty streets of our little town. My eyes couldn't turn away from Juniper's belly. That bulge was like a silent scream, a constant accusation. Guilt corroded me from within, acidic and relentless. If I had stayed, if I had endured Cyrus Poulter, maybe... It was Maddox who interrupted my dark thoughts. "Don't blame yourself, Winnie," he said, his voice low but firm. "Father would have made her stay with someone else. It's not your fault." I looked at him in surprise. I hadn't said anything, but Maddox was observing me, seeing beyond what the eyes could see. When we arrived at the church, Reverend Hayes received us with open arms. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. We embraced, and it was as if a dam had broken inside me. I cried as I hadn't cried in years, letting out all the pain, all the fear, all the guilt I had been carrying. With trembling hands, the Reverend made the call to Mrs. Cordelia Hayes. My heart was beating so hard, I thought it would explode. When he hung up, I saw a tired smile on his face. "Gareth will be fine," he said, and I felt my legs weaken with relief. At least that. At least one good thing amid so much misery. "Thaddeus," he said, "is on his way. He'll be on the first bus." I felt a mixture of joy and fear. How would the reunion be? How would he react to all this? If he saw Juniper pregnant, I don't know if he could bear it. The Reverend, always so kind, gave us some food donations. I took the bags with gratitude. I also had money I had saved from my work as a domestic servant. It wasn't much, but at that moment it seemed like a fortune. "No one is working at our house," Maddox explained, the shame evident in his voice. "We're living on donations." We returned home, the bags of food weighing in our arms, but with an even heavier weight in our hearts. The wait for Thaddeus seemed endless. When we finally saw Thaddeus coming down the road, his thin, tired figure standing out in the dust of the road, for a moment we all stood paralyzed. It was as if we no longer knew how to act, as if we were strangers to each other. Then, like a wave breaking on the shore, we all moved at the same time. Maddox was the first to reach him. The two brothers embraced with a strength that seemed to want to make up for all the lost years of disagreements. I saw tears in their eyes. Mother and I also cried. We were so impressed. He didn't seem like the same Maddox we knew. When I saw Thaddeus spotting Juniper's belly, good Lord, I saw the shock in his eyes, the painful understanding of what had happened. But he hugged her anyway, gentle and protective. Thaddeus turned to me, his eyes full of questions that I didn't know how to answer. We hugged in silence, our tears mixing. We were two survivors returning to the battlefield, ready to fight once more. We all entered the house. The small living room seemed even smaller with all of us there. But somehow it felt right, complete. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where we had so often shared our scarce meals. Now, with the Reverend's donations, we had enough food for everyone. As we ate, the stories began to flow. Thaddeus told about our life away from there, about the challenges we faced, about the small moments of happiness we managed to find. Maddox talked about how he tried to keep the family together, about sleepless nights, worrying about all of us. My mother, with a choked voice, talked about the daily struggle to put food on the table, to protect the little ones. Juniper, in her cruel innocence, talked animatedly about the baby, about how she could hardly wait to have her real toy. I saw the pain in everyone's eyes, the weight of that reality we didn't know how to face. Night fell, and with it came a heavy silence. The children went to sleep, and we adults sat there in the kitchen, beginning to plan our future. Time passed until things settled down. The family's life began to change when Maddox, always observant and creative, noticed that some native plants of the region seemed to thrive even in the driest periods. Intrigued, he began to study these plants, consulting books in the local library and talking with the older farmers in town. He understood farming because, willingly or not, he had worked with our father for a long time. After months of experiments on a small piece of land behind the house, Maddox developed a planting method that combined these resistant plants with traditional crops. The result was surprising: more abundant harvests resistant to drought. Meanwhile, Mother Maeve Calloway got a job at a laundry that specialized in washing and mending clothes that were in high demand in the Christian community. Her work brought a stable income to the house, with a formal contract and everything. It was her first official registration. With my mother working outside the home, I took on the responsibility of taking care of the house and the children. I dedicated myself especially to Juniper and her baby, offering the emotional support that my sister so desperately needed. The birth of Juniper's baby was a moment I'll never forget. It was a hot night, and the labor pains started suddenly. We had no way to take her to the hospital, so we called Mrs. Delphine Whittaker, the town's midwife. Mrs. Whittaker also came to help. The hours dragged on, and Juniper's screams echoed throughout the house. I held her hand, feeling like mine would break with each contraction she had. Good Lord, such strength she had! Suddenly, everything went silent. The baby didn't cry at birth. Mrs. Whittaker, with her experienced hands, turned the child upside down and gave it a few pats. They were the longest seconds of my life. Then finally we heard the cry, a strong cry from someone who very much wanted to live. It was a girl, tiny but a fighter. Juniper almost didn't survive the birth. She lost a lot of blood, and for days was between life and death. I took care of her day and night, bathing her, changing the sheets, making food. At the same time, I cared for the baby, whom we named Hope. The name seemed appropriate, because that child brought a new meaning to our lives. Seeing Juniper recovering slowly, learning to be a mother while still practically a child herself, broke my heart and filled me with pride at the same time. She looked at Hope with fear and love, as if she didn't quite know what to do with that little person. I remember that even weak and in pain, Juniper insisted on breastfeeding the girl. At first it was a struggle. Hope cried desperately with hunger because my sister barely had breasts, barely had milk to offer. But Juniper didn't give up. Night after night, day after day, she put Hope to her breast. The baby sucked hard as if her life depended on it, and in fact, it did. It was heartbreaking to see that scene, a child feeding another. But then, like a miracle, Juniper's body responded. Her breasts, once so small, began to grow and fill. The milk, which was once just a few drops, now overflowed. I remember seeing Juniper crying with relief and joy when she realized she could finally feed her daughter properly. "I can feel my milk coming down, Winnie," she would say, smiling. Over time, Juniper grew stronger. She began to sing to Hope the same lullabies that our mother sang to us. Gradually, the bond between them formed, strong as steel. I'll never forget that day. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the kitchen with my niece Hope. I put her in a large iron basin that Mother had, lined with soft cloths for her to stay in while I cleaned the kitchen. Then, when I started to scrub the stove, we heard loud claps at the gate. Juniper, who was playing with the girl, went to the window and suddenly froze. Her face lost all color, and her eyes widened in a way that chilled my soul. I thought she had seen a ghost. I swear to God. "It's him! It's him!" she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. It was Cyrus Poulter standing at our gate. He was no longer that threatening figure I remembered. He was thinner, with clean clothes, combed hair. He seemed like a different man, but for Juniper, he was still the monster of her nightmares. My sister ran to the bedroom, trembling so much she could barely walk. Hope began to cry, sensing her mother's fear. Thank God our mother was home that day. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, his voice choked. "I came to see my daughter. They said it's a girl." Mother stood at the door like a lioness protecting her cubs. Her eyes, which were normally so sweet, now had a fierce gleam that I had never seen before. "She doesn't want to see you," Mother responded firmly. "Please," he begged. I stood at the window watching everything without saying anything, and I saw tears in his eyes. "I've changed. I stopped drinking. I'm working, attending church. Ask Reverend Hayes. I just want to meet my daughter." From the bedroom, we could hear Juniper's muffled sobs. Hope was distracted with Sawyer. "Is it really a girl?" he asked, his voice trembling. "What is she like? What's her name?" I saw something change in my mother's face. "She's a beautiful girl," she said after a long silence. "Her name is Hope." Cyrus Poulter let the tears flow freely now. "Hope," he repeated, as if savoring each syllable. "It's a beautiful name." "Look," Mother continued, her voice softer now but still firm. "Now is not the time. Juniper is not ready yet. The girl is very small. Come back another day when things are calmer." "But can I really come back?" he asked anxiously like a child. "You can," Mother answered, "but it has to be her way, in her time. And if she never wants to see you, you'll have to respect that." He nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand. "I understand. I'll wait. Just tell her that I've changed, that I regret everything, and that I want to do things right this time. I want to help." He took an envelope from his pocket and extended it to my mother, who said that it wasn't necessary, that he should do what she asked. After he left, we found Juniper huddled in a corner of the room, hugging her knees. "I never want to see him, Mom," Juniper said, her voice small like a child's. "That's all right, my child," Mother answered, sitting beside her. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to. The decision is yours." I saw my sister hug Hope tightly. "He scares me so much." "We know, Juniper," I said, sitting on her other side. "Let's give it time." That night, as I watched Juniper nursing Hope, I thought about how life takes turns. There was the fruit of so much suffering also being the source of so much healing. And now, the one who had caused so much pain was returning, asking for a chance at redemption. Was it possible to forgive the unforgivable? Could some wounds really heal? I didn't have those answers, I only knew that we needed to protect Juniper and Hope. Let them find their own path in this complicated story. And so the days passed. Cyrus Poulter returned other times, always respectful, always at a distance. Sometimes he brought gifts for Hope, which he left at the gate without entering. Juniper kept them all in a box under the bed without opening them, as if they were memories of a nightmare she couldn't forget. Since Hope was born, my sister lived like a frightened bird inside the house. She never set foot in the street again, terrified of encountering Cyrus Poulter along the way. The fear was so great that she even stopped attending church. Sundays, which were once her favorite days, were now spent inside the house. My brothers and I took turns doing everything for her. Maddox went to the store, Thaddeus picked up medicines when needed, and I washed her and the baby's clothes in the washtub out back. It was as if the world out there was too big, too dangerous for her to face. Reverend Hayes, who was always an angel in our lives, came to our house days after Hope was born. He brought holy oil to bless the child, and some clothes that the church ladies had made. Juniper cried so much during the blessing that the Reverend had to stop several times. He held her hands and said that God had bigger plans than our pain, that Hope was proof of this. Hope grew quickly, healthy and smart. Soon she was crawling around the house, filling everything with laughter and babbling. It was as if she had brought light to our house, which had been a place of shadows for so long. While caring for Juniper and Hope, I also dedicated myself to the twins. Thaddeus, in turn, joined Maddox in agricultural work. Together they began to implement Maddox's new cultivation method on a larger scale. Thaddeus used his communicative way to convince other farmers to try the new method, organizing demonstrations and workshops. As news of the success of Maddox's method spread, farmers in the region began to seek out my brothers desperately. It was beautiful to see Maddox and Thaddeus teaching, explaining every detail with patience. The richer farmers paid well, and my brothers, always proper, divided the money evenly, and gave most of it to Mother to decide what to do with it, and Mother passed it to me. I was the one who replenished everything in the house. But what moved me most was seeing how they treated the poorer families. "Money, we'll see after the harvest," Maddox would say. And so they did. They taught the method, helped with the planting, and only received payment when the land gave its fruits. It was a deal based on trust and one's word, a rare thing in those difficult times. I remember once when Mr. Poulter, an old man who barely had enough to eat, came awkwardly asking for help. Maddox and Thaddeus spent an entire week on his small plot of land under the hot sun, teaching and working. Months later, when the harvest came in abundance, Mr. Poulter cried with joy. For the first time in his life, he had enough food for his family, and still had some left to sell. And so it spread from farm to farm, by word of mouth. It was like a chain of goodness. Whoever learned taught others. The region, which was once known for drought and misery, began to flourish. Where once there was only cracked earth and withered crops, now there was green and abundance. The town's stores, which had been empty, began to fill up. People no longer needed to go to the city to sell their products. Buyers came to us, attracted by the quality of the harvests. It was as if Maddox and Thaddeus had discovered not just a new way of planting, but of living in community, where one helped the other to grow. Mother, with her wisdom, saved part of the money they brought to secure the future, she said. But her heart didn't just live on saving. I remember as if it were yesterday the day she called me aside, her eyes shining, and whispered, "Winnie, let's make a surprise for Thaddeus." We went to town, she and I, On a hot Saturday afternoon, we entered that instrument store that Thaddeus always admired through the window. The salesman almost fell over when Mother said we wanted the piano. "The best you have, sir," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. It was expensive, you know. In fact, it was almost everything she had been saving for nearly 2 years. On Thaddeus's birthday, we waited for him to return from the fields. He was dirty with earth, tired, but with that smile that never left his face. When he opened the door to the living room, he stopped as if he had seen a ghost. There in the corner of our humble living room was the gleaming piano. "My God," he whispered, his hands trembling as he touched the keys. How did you—" "It's yours, my son," Mother said, emotional. "So you never forget your dreams." Thaddeus sat on the bench, played a few notes, and suddenly our simple little house was filled with the most beautiful music. It was as if those calloused hands from working the land had stored all the music in the world inside them. From that day on, every night, no matter how tired he was, Thaddeus would sit at that piano while Mother and I prepared dinner. The music filled every corner of the house. Even Mrs. Whittaker would come to chat and listen to my brother. The notes danced in the air, mixing with the smell of food, with the children's laughter, with the hustle and bustle of life. And now, so many years later, when I close my eyes, I can still hear Thaddeus's melodies. The laundry where my mother worked also benefited from this economic growth. With more money circulating in the community, the demand for clothes increased, and the laundry expanded, offering more jobs to local women. Maddox and Thaddeus didn't stop there. They began to work in a cooperative system, helping small farmers organize themselves to sell their products directly to larger markets, eliminating intermediaries and increasing profits. Over time, our family, which had once struggled to survive, became a pillar of the community. This was very good, because for a long time we had lived on donations. Now, it was us who could help. I'll tell you a story that still makes my heart beat faster, even after so many years. It was as if a hurricane had entered our lives, messing up everything we thought we knew about love and family. It all started one Sunday after church. Thaddeus arrived home with a young woman who looked like she had stepped out of one of those fashion magazines we saw at newsstands in the big city. "This is Maeve," Thaddeus said, somewhat awkwardly. My girlfriend." It was as if lightning had struck our living room. Mother dropped the plate she was drying. Maddox choked on his coffee, and I stood there, mouth open, staring at that scene that seemed to have come out of a dream. Maeve smiled, and I swear the room became brighter. "Pleasure to meet you all," she said, her voice sweet as honey. "Thaddeus talks so much about you that I already feel like part of the family." It was then that Maddox, with that observant way of his, commented, "Ah, Maeve, I remember you and your family. We've been helping your father with the new planting method, haven't we?" Maeve nodded, her blue eyes shining with gratitude. "Yes, and you have no idea how that has changed our lives. Father says this year we'll have the best harvest in decades." That's when the pieces started to fit together in my head. That family, I knew them by sight from Sunday Mass. They always sat a few benches ahead of us, the father with his worn hat in his hands, the mother with a flowery handkerchief on her head, and the children, all beautiful with those impossible blue eyes that seemed to absorb all the light from the altar. For years we had been bench neighbors at church, exchanging only shy smiles and nods. They were simple, hard-working people like us, fighting against the same dry land, the same difficulties, but we had never really talked, as if there was an invisible barrier between our families. In truth, I knew the reason well. Everyone in our region was afraid to get close to us because of my father. My father never went to church with us, but people still saw him staggering around. It was only when Maddox and Thaddeus began to help Maeve's father with the new planting method that this barrier began to break. I remember the day I saw my brothers talking animatedly with Mr. Mercer, Maeve's father, after Mass. It was the first time I saw that man smile genuinely, his eyes full of hope. "Well," Thaddeus said, bringing me back to the present. "That's how we reconnected." Maeve was always around when I went to help her father on the farm. Maeve blushed slightly, a shy smile playing on her lips. "I always thought Thaddeus was special," she confessed, "since school days, but I never had the courage to talk to him. It took him coming to save our plantation for me to find courage." I looked at them side by side in our simple living room. Maeve with her beauty that seemed not to belong to our arid world, and Thaddeus with his calloused hands from working the land and agile fingers from playing the piano. It was an image I never imagined seeing. And to think that it all started with an act of kindness, with my brothers extending a hand to help a family in difficulty. That made me realize how small acts can change the course of our lives in ways we could never predict. In the days that followed, Maeve became a constant presence in our house. She came almost every night, sat beside Thaddeus while he played the piano, her eyes shining with admiration. Sometimes I caught them in the yard, hidden in a dark corner, kissing as if the world would end tomorrow. My cheeks would burn with embarrassment, and I would tiptoe away, feeling like an intruder. But there was something in Thaddeus's eyes that bothered me. It was as if behind all that apparent love, there was a shadow, a doubt that he couldn't hide. It was one night during dinner that Maddox spoke up. Maeve wasn't there, thank God. "So, Thaddeus," he said between bites, "when are you going to get married? Marriage is a serious thing, you know. You need to be sure. It's for life." Thaddeus remained quiet, poking at his food with his fork, his face thoughtful. After dinner, he called me to talk in the yard, there near the chicken coop. My brother opened his heart. "Winnie," he said, his voice trembling a little, "do you think Maeve is a good woman for me?" That question caught me by surprise. After so many years, we no longer talked about those confused feelings he had. It was as if it had been in another life. "Of course, Thaddeus," I replied, trying to sound convinced. "She's beautiful, kind, and you can see from afar that she's in love with you." But then I saw the doubt in his eyes, as vast as the starry sky above us. Thaddeus sighed deeply and told me that he had already talked to Maeve about his doubts, and what she said left me with a heavy heart. "She said she loves me," he said, running his hand through his hair. "She said she accepts me as I am and is sure she'll make me love her, that these doubts will disappear with time." I stood there, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to scream for him not to do it, not to get married without being sure. But another part thought of Maeve, that beautiful, love-struck young woman who might be able to give my brother the life he deserved. In the end, in the blink of an eye, our family found itself in the middle of an engagement between Thaddeus and Maeve, but with that shadow of doubt in his eyes. It was during one of those visits to her family that my life also took a turn. Maeve's older brother, Harlan, a young man as handsome as she was, with the same impossible blue eyes, said he wanted to get to know me better. Silly me. I thought people with blue eyes were like people from another planet. Rich, untouchable, like those movie stars we saw on posters in the big city. It had never crossed my mind that someone like that could look at me. But he looked. And how he looked. Of course I had seen him and the family in church before, as I already said. How could one not notice those blue eyes that seemed to flash even in the dimness of the chapel? But I always lowered my gaze quickly, concentrating on my prayers. My life was too hard to afford the luxury of daydreaming about handsome young men. Each Sunday was a struggle to get to church, waking up before sunrise, helping Mother with breakfast, making sure everyone looked presentable in our patched but clean clothes. I went to Mass to truly pray, to thank God that we had food to eat, to ask for strength to face another hard week. There was no space in my mind to notice young men, no matter how handsome they were. But now, suddenly, I was the target of his attention. I felt like a fairy tale princess. At first, I could hardly speak. I stayed quiet, only answering what he asked me, my voice almost a whisper. My hands trembled so much that I hid them in the pockets of my dress. It was one afternoon, sitting in the shade of an old oak tree in the square, that he confessed to me, "You know, Winnie, I always looked at you in church, but you never looked back." I felt my face burn with embarrassment. I went to pray," I mumbled awkwardly. He smiled a smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Now that I know you better, I understand. You're a very serious, responsible young woman." I just nodded, not knowing what to say. I began to notice the looks as we passed, the girls sighing, casting envious glances in my direction. I felt a mixture of pride and fear. Pride to be by his side, fear of not being enough. It was Mother who alerted me, with that wisdom that only mothers have. "Child, be careful. This young man has many suitors. Value yourself. If he truly likes you, that's good. But you must also show that you're interested." Those words kept hammering in my head. At our next meeting, which was always on Sundays after Mass, I counted the hours to see him. As we walked toward the square, I took a deep breath and forced myself to speak more, despite the shyness that made me want to bury my head in a hole. I began to tell him about my day, talked about my niece. To my surprise, he listened with genuine attention, his blue eyes fixed on me, as if each of my words was precious. It was then that Harlan began to talk about his work. "You know, Winnie," he said, his blue eyes shining with enthusiasm, "I work with my father on the farm. But it's not just planting and harvesting. We're always looking for ways to improve our production." He spoke with such pride about what he did that I found myself fascinated. Harlan told me about the new techniques they were learning from Maddox and Thaddeus, about how it was changing their lives. "Before, we barely harvested enough to eat," he explained. "Now, with this new method, we're even able to think about expanding a bit, maybe even buying another small piece of land." I listened to all this with a mixture of admiration and, I confess, a little envy. There I was, a simple girl who barely knew how to read and write properly, listening to things that seemed so distant from my reality. "It must be wonderful," I said softly, "to see things growing like that, improving." Harlan looked at me with those blue eyes that seemed to see into my soul. "It is," he said, suddenly taking my hand. "And you know something? I would really like to share this with someone special." I felt my heart jump. Could he be saying what I thought he was? "Winnie," he continued, his voice becoming more serious, "I know we haven't known each other for a long time, but I like you very much, Your simplicity, your strength. You make me want to be a better person." As he spoke, I saw not just the handsome young man, but a hard-working man with dreams and ambitions, someone who, like my family, was fighting to improve his life. I could barely breathe. There I was, a country girl, hearing words that I had only imagined in my wildest dreams. "I wanted to know," he said, squeezing my hand lightly, "if you would agree to court me, so we can get to know each other better, you know, to see if what we're feeling can turn into something more serious." I was speechless. My heart was beating so hard I thought he could hear it. 1,000 thoughts passed through my head in 1 second. What if I wasn't good enough? What if his family didn't accept me? What if... But then I looked into his eyes, saw the sincerity, the hope, and something inside me said, I needed to have courage. "Yes," I whispered, my voice almost disappearing. "I accept." The smile that lit up Harlan's face at that moment. I'll never forget it. He hugged me right there in the square, in front of everyone. I felt my face burn with embarrassment, but at the same time, I felt a happiness I had never felt before. That night, I returned home floating. Mother, with that sense of hers, immediately noticed that something had changed. "What is it, my child?" she asked, looking me up and down. I told her everything, the words coming in a torrent. I spoke of the courtship proposal, of Harlan's plans, of how he made me feel special. Mother listened in silence, a small smile on her lips. When I finished, she took my hands in hers, calloused from so much work. "My child," she said with that voice that always calmed me. "I'm happy for you. But remember, love is like a plantation. It needs care, attention, hard work. Don't get carried away just by the beauty of the moment. Tend to this love as you tend to your flowers in the yard." Those words stayed with me in the days that followed, as Harlan and I began our journey together. I strove to be the best version of myself. I learned about work on the farm, became interested in his affairs, but I also shared my dreams, my fears. And so, day by day, our love grew like a well-planted seed, watered with affection and care. I, who before hardly dared to dream of a better future, now found myself building plans alongside a man who valued me for who I was. Of course, not everything was rosy. There were people in town who whispered, who thought I wasn't good enough for Harlan. But with each sideways glance, each malicious comment, I remembered my mother's words. Love is like a plantation, and I was determined to make ours flourish, no matter what came our way. Now, what I'm going to tell you, my child, is something that... Good heavens, how to tell this story without dying of embarrassment again? But I'll try, because it was a moment that changed my life forever. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was helping Mother prepare dinner, as I always did, when I heard Thaddeus's voice outside. Nothing unusual, I thought, until I heard other voices with him. My heart almost stopped when I recognized his voice. Harlan's. I ran to the window, and there they were. Thaddeus, Maeve, and Harlan. Good Lord, I wasn't prepared. My hair was in a badly made braid, and my dress was all wrinkled from the day's work. Thaddeus entered the kitchen with that mischievous smile of his. "Hey, Mom, I brought some visitors. Harlan wanted to hear me play the piano." Liar. Everyone knew Thaddeus played at church every weekend. This was a trap, and I, silly me, had fallen right into it. "Winnie, go fix yourself up, girl." Mother pushed me toward the bedroom, understanding the situation in the blink of an eye. I fixed myself up as best I could, combing my hair, redoing a good braid, and putting on a little of that fragrant talcum powder that I saved for special occasions. When I returned to the living room, Harlan looked at me in a way that made my stomach tie itself in knots. Dinner was torture. I could barely swallow the food, too nervous with Harlan there beside me. And to make matters worse, when it was time to take Maeve home, which always had to be before 10 o'clock, Thaddeus invited me to accompany them to the farm. On the way, Thaddeus and Maeve went ahead, exchanging kisses and giggles like two love-struck doves. Dying of embarrassment, I walked behind with Harlan. That's when he took my hand. "May I?" he asked, and I could only nod in agreement. We walked hand in hand the whole way, talking softly. I could only think about the warmth of his hand in mine, the good smell that came from him. When we arrived at their farm, my heart was pounding. Despite my embarrassment, I didn't want to part from him. Thaddeus and Maeve moved away a bit to say goodbye, and Harlan pulled me aside. "Winnie," he said, his voice husky. "May I kiss you?" I couldn't even respond. I just closed my eyes and waited. The first kiss was quick, shy, but then he asked if I had liked it, and when I said yes, my God, the second kiss was different. It was intense, passionate. At first, it was a disaster. My teeth knocked against his. I didn't know where to put my hands. But then it was as if the world had stopped spinning. I felt my entire body heat up. It was as if I was on fire inside. Frightened by that new sensation, I pushed Harlan away and said I needed to go home. On the way back, I argued with Thaddeus. "I'll never do something like that with you again," I said, between tears of embarrassment and confusion. At home, I locked myself in the bedroom and cried all night. The next day, Juniper told Mother that I wouldn't stop crying. That's when Mother came to talk to me, trembling from head to toe. I confessed, "Mom, I'm pregnant." Her eyes widened with shock. "Winnie, I barely let you out of the house and you already do this? That Harlan didn't seem to be that type. What a disappointment, my child. What a disappointment." But then Mother asked me exactly what had happened between us. Between sobs, I told her everything. The kiss, his hands on my waist, that tingling I felt inside. And then, to my surprise, Mother began to laugh so hard that tears ran down her face. I was so shocked with my mother. I even thought, well, is Mother so happy that she's going to be a grandmother? "Child," she said when she finally could speak, "this is not being pregnant." I stared at her without understanding anything. If it wasn't pregnancy, what was it that I had felt? It was then that Mother sat beside me on the bed and began to explain about our bodies, about the feelings we have when we like someone, about how it's normal to feel heat, that desire to be close. "But child," she said, serious now, "you have to be careful. These things are beautiful, they're good, but they have to be at the right time, with the right person." I sat there listening to Mother talk, feeling a mixture of relief and embarrassment. Relief for not being pregnant, embarrassment for having been so foolish. "And Harlan?" I asked, afraid of the answer. Mother smiled that sweet way of hers. "If he truly likes you, he'll respect your time. You're young. You have a lot ahead of you." That night, lying in bed, I thought about everything. Good Lord, what a relief I felt. A silly thought passed through my head. So that's why Maeve's belly never grows, even though she's always kissing Thaddeus. But soon other questions began to arise like waves in a turbulent sea. How had Juniper become pregnant by Cyrus Poulter then? I knew this subject was too delicate to ask her about. Just thinking about it made my heart ache. I decided I needed to know more. The next day, I anxiously waited for Mother to come home from work. As soon as I had the opportunity, with my heart pounding, I asked her. I saw her face turn red as a ripe tomato, but she took a deep breath and said she would tell me. After all, I was already a woman and should indeed know. My goodness. When she began to explain about men and women being naked, about intimate parts and what happened, I almost died of embarrassment. I wanted the ground to open and swallow me right there. But at the same time, I couldn't stop listening. Mother, with her calm and gentle voice, explained that this should happen with love when two people are married. "That's how it should be, child. It's the right way," she said, her eyes full of seriousness. But then her voice became sad. "With Juniper, it was different, my child. She wasn't married. She was a child. She was forced to do something she didn't understand, that she didn't want." At that moment, it was as if lightning had struck me. Tears began to stream down my face without my being able to control them. I cried for Juniper, cried for her stolen innocence, cried for everything she must have gone through. Suddenly, everything made sense. The constant fear in her eyes, the way she shrank when she heard Cyrus Poulter's voice, calling at the gate. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces, thinking of my sister's suffering. I even thought it should have been me instead of her, if I hadn't run away that day. I began to look at my sister differently, not with pity, but with immense admiration. Despite everything she had been through, she still found the strength to smile, to care for little Hope with so much love, even though she still wouldn't leave the house. Juniper was stronger than I had ever imagined. And as for me, well, that conversation with Mother had changed everything. Now I better understood the value of my body, of my innocence. I understood that what I felt for Harlan was beautiful. Good heavens, how time flies. It seems like it was yesterday that I was trembling like a leaf in front of Harlan, not knowing exactly what to do with that kiss that left my legs wobbly. And in the blink of an eye, there I was, engaged to him. That Sunday after Mass, I was already braver. I knew that kisses didn't make babies, so I let Harlan kiss me until I lost my breath. It was a sin, it was. But may our Lord forgive me, because love is stronger than anything in this life. It was there, under that old oak tree in the square, that my life changed for good. Harlan held my hands, looked at me with those blue eyes that seemed like two pieces of the sky fallen to earth, and said with a trembling voice, "Winnie, will you be my wife?" Holy Virgin! I thought my heart would jump right out of my mouth. The words got stuck in my throat, and I could only nod. It was all I wanted most in life, but I had never dared even to dream it. We went first to his farm to tell his parents. Oh my goodness, I was so nervous. But it was all so different from what I expected. Mrs. Imogen Mercer, my future mother-in-law, hugged me so tightly that I felt all the mother's love she had to give. Mr. Atticus Mercer, my future father-in-law, opened such a wide smile that it lit up the entire room. And Maeve, she jumped with joy. Now we would truly be sisters. At home, the news fell like a divine blessing. After so much misfortune, Mother cried so much I thought she would dry up. Maddox joked, asking if there wasn't another sister left for him, and we all laughed so hard our stomachs hurt. By the time of my wedding, I had already turned 17. The days passed in a rush. Thaddeus and I were engaged with the wedding set for the same date. Economy, you know. I didn't want any other reverend besides our dear Reverend Hayes to celebrate. That holy man who had helped our family so much in the most difficult moments deserved to be part of this joy. And wouldn't you know, on the wedding day a miracle happened. Juniper, my little sister who hadn't set foot outside the house since Hope was born, appeared all dressed up at the church door. "Even if the world ends today, I'm not missing this wedding," she said, with a strength in her voice that we hadn't seen in a long time. I confess I cried like a fool when I saw her there, standing, facing her fears for us. Mr. Mercer walked me down the aisle after giving away Maeve. What a beautiful scene. 2 brides, 2 brothers, 1 family. The celebration was at Harlan's family farm, with such abundance that it seemed like a rich person's wedding. There was music, dancing, food for everyone in the region. Even those who weren't invited showed up, and no one went without a full plate and a glass of wine. I remember looking at the starry sky that night and thanking God and Our Lady with all the strength in my heart. There, seeing Thaddeus dance with Maeve, Juniper smiling and running after Hope, who at 3 years old was bursting with health and energy, Maddox talking animatedly with the guests, and Harlan looking at me as if I were the most precious thing in the world. I understood that sometimes we need to go through the dark valley to reach the flowering field. Mother couldn't contain her happiness, and when Harlan pulled me to dance our first waltz as a married couple, whispering in my ear that he would love me for the rest of his life, I felt so much love. I was no longer the Winnie who had fled frightened from a drunk old man's house. I was a strong woman, loved, respected. I was the wife of the most handsome man in the region. Yes, ma'am. And no one could take that away from me. After the celebration, we went to our rented little house. It was small, but we didn't worry about that. I had helped choose every little thing in there, from the calico curtains to the shiny pots. Some furniture we bought with the little money we had saved. Others were gifts from the family. Every little piece of that house had a bit of us in it. My first night of love, Ave Maria, just remembering makes my cheeks hot. It was perfect, you know. Harlan was so gentle, so caring. But I confess I was worried when no blood came out, as my mother had said would happen. I kept wondering if something was wrong with me. But there was so much happiness that I soon forgot this silly worry. The next day, I woke up feeling like the happiest woman in the world. It was as if I had been born again, you know. Everything seemed more beautiful, more colorful. Even the breakfast I made for my husband, what a good thing to say, my husband, seemed to have a special taste. In the first days, I went on foot to Mother's house every blessed day. She was working at the laundry, but I had that anxiety to know how the children were managing. But you know what? It was quite a surprise to see how well my sister Juniper was doing. Juniper was now taking care of herself. Her daughter was clean. All my brothers had full bellies. The scamp was a real housewife. By this time she was already 14 years old. It was moving to see her going out into the street hand in hand with Hope, facing her fears one step at a time. Seeing my little sister so strong filled me with pride. And that's when I realized I didn't need to go there every day anymore. They were managing well, and I had my own house to look after now. So I began to do my household chores, arranging everything properly for my Harlan. I washed, ironed, cooked, and still had time to make some touches to the house. I planted flowers in the small yard, made new cushions for the sofa, hand-sewn. Back at Mother's house, there was the old sewing machine, but I thought it looked good that way. I wanted everything to be perfect when my husband arrived. And the time when Harlan arrived was the best part of the day. I would be anxious as a girl waiting for a present, peeping through the window to see if he was coming yet. When he entered through that door, tired from work on the farm, but with that smile that illuminated everything, it was all celebration at our house. Well, let's say we made good use of our time as newlyweds. My God, how time flies! It seems like it was yesterday that I was dancing my first waltz with Harlan, and in the blink of an eye, there I was, mother of 4 children. 4! Can you believe it? I who once thought I wouldn't have any to tell the story. Our children are the joy of our lives. The oldest, Thaddeus Thad Jr., was born strong like his father, with the same blue eyes that enchanted me. Then came Clementine, a sweet and smart girl who soon became my companion in the kitchen. The third was Jasper, who inherited the stubbornness of the family and a special talent for dealing with animals. Finally came our youngest Willa, a delicate little flower who brought even more love to our house. When I was pregnant with Jasper, something happened that made me happier than ever. We managed to buy a small farm. It was small, but to us it seemed like paradise on earth. The first thing Harlan did was build a chicken coop, and I swear I cried with emotion when I saw it. Do you know why? Because it reminded me of my dear mother. Poor thing, dividing a single egg for 6 hungry mouths, and later, with much sweat and tears, managing to have a chicken coop, fruit of her work washing clothes for others. All because of my father. But why remember him? What I had to tell about that good-for-nothing, I've already told. Better to change the subject. Our farm was a beauty. Seeing my children running through that land, planting, playing, filled my heart with joy. Thad Jr. loved helping his father in the fields, while Clementine took care of the flowers with special care. Jasper, from a young age, already showed a knack for dealing with the chickens and little pigs we raised. Harlan, that loving man, built a treehouse that was a marvel. Large, strong, everyone could fit in there. Sometimes on summer nights, we would sleep up there, looking at the stars and thanking God for so much goodness. Willa, tiny as she was, would stay with the fireflies that appeared around the treehouse. And how could she not? It was too beautiful. But you must be wondering, and the rest of the family, Winnie? What became of your siblings? My child, that's where it gets interesting. There are things in this story that will leave you jaw-dropped, just as they left us and the entire town. Let's start with Juniper, my little sister who suffered so much. Well, wouldn't you know? She got married again, and to such a good man Cyrus Poulter worked at the town's granary, was respected by all. They had 2 beautiful daughters like dolls. It seems Juniper only knew how to make girls. But what surprised me most was seeing her forgive Cyrus Poulter. Yes, that very same one. Hope, her daughter with him, kept asking to meet her father. And Juniper, with that soft heart God gave her, ended up allowing it. That's when I found out something that chilled my spine. Cyrus Poulter was 57 years old when he committed that barbarity with my sister. Holy Virgin, I had never stopped to think about his age. Not even back then when my father handed me over as a gambling prize. Cyrus Poulter, despite everything, showed himself to be a truly repentant man. He gave up drinking completely, never put another drop in his mouth. Hope, my niece, loved him as both father and grandfather. Imagine that. And wouldn't you know, he redeemed himself, helped with Hope's studies, even paid for courses for her. My niece graduated, got a good job in the city. That's where she made her family. I confess that at first it was difficult for everyone to accept, especially for Juniper. But seeing the good he did for Hope, the way he took care of her, gradually we lowered our guard. We can't say we forgot the past, but we learned to live with it in a different way. The twins, Silas and Sawyer, grew up to be handsome, strong, hard-working young men. Both got married too, but Sawyer decided to try his luck in the city with his wife. From time to time, he would send a letter saying he was doing well, that life in the big city was difficult, but worth it. Maddox became rich, truly rich, the kind who can cherry-pick who he'll marry. And he did choose a woman so beautiful and good that she gave him 8 children. 8! There were endless children in that house. Her name was the same as Thaddeus's wife, Maeve. Seeing Maddox like this, well off, respected by all, filled me with pride. I remembered that skinny boy who confronted our father to protect the family, who worked like a condemned man to lift us out of misery. Now he was almost like a colonel, one of those that everyone tips their hat to when he passes. I preferred not to think about the cruelties he did to Thaddeus. And speaking of Thaddeus, Thaddeus deserves a chapter of his own. Remember that he always had that gift for music? And another thing, remember that he had his doubts before marrying Maeve? Well, let me tell you what happened. It all began when he and Maeve moved to the city with their 2 children, Fletcher, 7 years old, and Gareth, 5. Thaddeus was pursuing his dream of being a famous pianist, and he succeeded. After all, my brother had talent. Thaddeus began playing in the fanciest clubs in the big city. This wasn't just any little bar piano. This was in marble halls with crystal chandeliers the size of a house. High society elbowed each other. They say even important politicians would wait in line to greet him after the shows. The letters that arrived were enviable. They spoke of fine clothes, new cars, expensive toys for the boys. Fletcher and Gareth had everything. Imported bicycles, even private English lessons. It was a life that we here in the country only saw in movies. But you know how it is. The devil tempts, and sometimes he wins. So, on a Tuesday afternoon, I remember it as if it were yesterday. Maeve suddenly appeared in town with bags and children in tow, her eyes red from crying. And the story she told, my God in heaven, took anyone's breath away. She went straight to her parents' house, and in the blink of an eye, the news spread faster than gossip on market day. Thaddeus had misbehaved, and it was serious. My brother had cheated on Maeve, and if I tell you with whom, you won't believe it. It was with Gareth. Yes, that Gareth, Mrs. Cordelia Hayes's grandson, Prescott, Hayes's son, his first love from adolescence. Holy Mary! When I heard, I thought it was a bad joke, that someone was trying to play a trick on me. Maeve, poor thing, told the story to whoever wanted to hear, between tears and curses. She said Thaddeus had been coming home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, until one day, after suspecting so much, she decided to follow him after a show. Well, she caught the 2 of them, Thaddeus in Gareth's arms, in a breathtaking kiss. The scandal was so great it seemed like the world would end right there. Mr. Mercer, my father-in-law, was furious. He swore that if Thaddeus set foot in town again, he would receive him with a bullet. The boys, poor things, were devastated. They said their father had died for them that day. By this time, the boys were already young men. If I'm not mistaken, Fletcher, the oldest, was about 13 years old. And so, in the blink of an eye, that family that seemed to have come out of a fairy tale turned to dust. Thaddeus stayed in the city, playing piano for ever smaller audiences, because Maeve made a fuss there too. A few months later, Thaddeus appeared here in town. He went straight to Mother's house. Mother, with that mother's heart that doesn't abandon a child even in disgrace, received him. She was happy to see her son, but the disappointment was stamped in her eyes. When I heard he was there, I ran to talk to him. My God, what a sad scene. Thaddeus cried like a child in my arms. He poured out everything, said he was happy with Maeve, that they had become rich with his shows. But then one night in the big city, where everything is more liberal, Gareth appeared with some friends at his show. At first, Thaddeus didn't even recognize him, but Gareth already knew it was him. He stayed there in front of the stage, looking with those eyes of admiration. After the show, they met again, and it was as if time hadn't passed. You know that old flame? It reignited with full force. Thaddeus began to stay after the shows, always with the excuse that he was rehearsing or making contacts. But in reality, he was with Gareth. He told me with tears in his eyes that he fell in love again, that he couldn't control what he felt. He was going crazy. I felt so sorry for Maeve and the children. I never thought my brother would be capable of such a thing. But at the same time, I remembered all the doubts he had before marrying. Deep down, I think Maeve always knew she was taking this risk. Thaddeus asked me to talk to Harlan to see if he could convince Maeve and the boys to forgive him. I even tried, you know, but Maeve wouldn't even listen. She was too hurt, wounded to the core of her soul. The boys, well, for them, their father had died the day they learned of the betrayal. None of them wanted to see Thaddeus, not even if he were painted in gold. I was in a pickle, you know. On one side, my brother suffering, wanting to return to his family. On the other, my sister-in-law and my nephews, too hurt to forgive. And there I was, in the middle, not knowing exactly what to do or say. Sometimes, alone, I would wonder, didn't Maeve know, deep down, that this could happen? She knew Thaddeus's past, knew about his doubts. But then I would feel guilty for thinking that way. After all, betrayal is betrayal, right? There's no excuse. He decided to marry her, so he should have conformed. The entire town was abuzz. At Sunday masses, it was the main topic after the Reverend left. In the conversation circles in the square, everyone giving their 2 cents, judging, condemning. And Thaddeus, well, he returned to the city. I heard he continued playing, but it was no longer that big success. People commented, gossiped. Many people no longer wanted to hire him to play at family parties. You know how it is. Gareth disappeared. They say he went far away, ashamed of having caused so much confusion. Others say he and Thaddeus still meet secretly from time to time. But who can know? Maeve raised the boys alone with the help of her parents. She's a strong woman, you know. She held her head high and moved forward. The boys grew up, became good men. But to this day, they want nothing to do with their father. And I stayed here watching everything from afar with a heavy heart. Because in the end, they're all family, right? And family, we love them even with all their flaws. My child, let me tell you something that happened with Mother that still gives me a lump in my throat, just remembering. You know, after everything she went through with that good-for-nothing of my father, we thought she would never want to know about men again. But our heart is a stubborn creature, you know. It was there at the laundry where she worked that she met Mr. Cyrus Poulter, a widower, well along in years, who came on all smooth, full of pretty talk. At first it was a beauty to see. Mother with that smile on her face that we hadn't seen in years, all dressed up to go to work. She seemed to have rejuvenated 10 years. It wasn't long before she brought him to live at her house. We were wary, of course. After everything we went through, how could we not be? But seeing Mother's happiness, softened even a heart of stone. So we swallowed our fear and gave Mr. Poulter a chance. Ah, my child, how we regretted it. Little by little, like a snake that slithers through the grass without making noise, the scoundrel showed who he really was. It started with harsher words, then some accidental pushes. Mother, poor thing with all those scars, tried to justify it. She said it was his way, that he loved too much, that he was jealous. Until one day, Holy Mother of God, that shameless man thought he could raise his hand to my mother. He slapped her, saying it was out of love. Love, my foot! That was pure wickedness. But you know what happened? Mother didn't stay quiet this time. This time, she didn't bow her head. She went straight to Maddox's house and told him everything. And there he went. He turned into a beast. He personally went to Mother's house, and you should have seen it. He threw Mr. Poulter and his junk out by force. He shouted that if he came near Mother again, he would know hell on earth. I had never seen Maddox like that. He seemed to have grown 2 meters with so much rage. Mother, poor thing, was in a difficult situation. She had worked at the laundry for 9 years, approaching 10. But how could she continue there with Mr. Poulter around? In the end, she had to leave. She was sad, of course. That job was her pride, you know. But between the job and safety, there was no choice. But then Maddox did something that filled my heart with pride. He told Mother that she didn't need to worry about money anymore, that he would take care of everything she needed. Imagine that. And you know what? It was the best thing that could have happened. Mother could finally rest after a lifetime of toil. She began to come to my house more often. We would spend the whole afternoon chatting, drinking a little coffee, remembering old stories. The good ones, of course. And it was during this time that she swore she would never want to know about any man again. Today I have 12 grandchildren and 9 great-grandchildren. We've been through so much, but here we are, strong as a 100-year-old oak. I sit on the wooden chair out on the porch, watching the last rays of sunlight filter through the trees. How many years has it been since I ran away from Cyrus Poulter's house with a shattered heart? The old wounds are still there like faded scars on the skin, no longer painful but still a reminder of the past. Today, as I watch the family gathered for Willa's birthday party, I understand that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. Forgiveness is accepting that the past happened, but choosing not to let it define your future. I forgave my father, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to be free. I forgave myself for running away that day, even though there were many nights I blamed myself. Juniper taught me the greatest lesson about the power of forgiveness. She, with all her pain, still found a way not to live in hatred. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but she did it. As I look at the familiar faces around me, I realize we're not just survivors, we're victors. We've made it through the darkness and found the light. If my story speaks to you, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other stories about healing and forgiveness. Sometimes the most broken hearts are the ones that love the deepest.